data source. My data source. This item should be okay. 1 moment. I think we are going on the wrong path. Items. Items. Come up. Yeah. Item is varme. So I'm going to see here. Okay. No item. No record is selected. That's cool. Okay. Fantastic. So we have it all sorted now. So now that if I select a record here, it changes all this information. For example, we have the issue 2. If I put our update here, this should go into the expected table. So our update, if I go back to my SharePoint list, I can get back the information that I just updated. Okay, so you can see our update on the issue 2. You can see it here. It did not create any item because now I use that. Now that is one way to go about it. If we go to our monitor, we'll see that we have a bunch of information available inside this the monitor, and we can maybe look at each of them, what happened inside it. Now you see that we're getting a little data. Our data source now has a data source because we have linked a data source to the action that we are performing. Okay, sometimes you have an issue, you try to figure out what is going on, is it returning anything at all? Is it sending the appropriate data to the data source? If you're using a SharePoint list, using an SQL server on-prem, or maybe a data vast table, is it sending this data to the actual table or maybe to the data source? Of course, you can find that information here. Now, the monitor tool allows you to take logs. Now, if you are one person that knows how to read the logs, it will help you and get it easier for you to maybe understand what was returned, what was sent, and what was submitted. If some things were not submitted, you will get to see them here. If all were submitted, you get to see them here. I'm going to look at the last one that we did. Here we submitted this information. So that information sent a request to this URL. Okay, and then we have the method of the information that the last information we made was post, and the last request we made was a post, and the last information that happened was a get request, because after the post request, it sent a request to this URL to return the data that we have submitted, so that it will be able to update this gallery with the new information that was just updated here. So that is why we are seeing a get request here, which is giving us all this information about whatever is inside that place. Now, some of them might be irrelevant, but you will get a whole lot of information here to be able to assist you understand what has gone wrong. Now, this is one tool to use to troubleshoot your application. We have a couple of other tools. Another tool you can also use to figure out or troubleshoot this application is the browser dev tool. Now, this browser dev tool is always handy for a lot of people. I know some people don't know how to use it, but I mean, it's quite simple. Okay, sometimes the monitor trace might not give you some of the things that you want according to some people, but I feel like the monitor trace gives me a whole lot. In fact, that will help me troubleshoot my application to the corest. Whatever information I need, however I need them. Okay, you have the browser dev tool, which you can either bring by right-clicking and then going to inspect, or you can click the F12 on your keyboard. The F12 on your keyboard can bring it out, or you can also come here and then go to settings. I think it should be on setting more tools, and then you go to the developer tool, which is at the bottom part of this. And once you click that, it comes out right here. Now, you don't want to get all this information here. You want to look at the networks. So for you to get networks, you can expand this. Okay, you can expand this, and then okay, where are we again? Something changed in my browser, or I'm using an Edge browser. Sorry about that. So you select your network, and then under your network, you get the log of every single event that the app performs on real time. Now, if I click any button here, for example, the submit button, you see I have an invoke here that gives me the status code and every information. In fact, the URL that I'm sending a request to etc. I can go to preview and see the value type, or maybe the information that I'm sending, and how I can relate to the information. This is the SharePoint list. You can also see here it's sending a comms to a SharePoint list, and then a SharePoint list might, of course, most likely return some information. So if you click here, you will see the information here says the value is in progress. Okay, and if you drill down here, you will see the detail of the item that you have actually made a request on. I'm going to see, okay, the title of the item is issue 2. Of course, that is a selected item. If I increase this, okay, I think this is way too small now. Okay, now if I increase this, you see that the title is issue 2, and you can see that we have that here. If I perform any action inside here, maybe change this to select this, or select all this information, you will see that I have a set of new requests, and then I can also click them to understand what is going on inside that request. Okay, when I make a request to the server, it brings out all those information. Now, that is one tool, one of the tools that you can also use. Microsoft has a tool a certain ID. These IDs are IDs like your Power App IDs, maybe a section ID. You can always get your section ID at the top right of your browser, at the top right of. So for you to get a section ID, a section of this, what is happening here, you can simply click on this information, and then you will see session detail. On the session detail, you will see your timestamp, you will see your session ID, and then you will see tenant ID, object ID, etc. The most important thing you need to troubleshoot your issue is the session ID, and the second is your app ID. Your app ID, if it's not here, you can always go back and then go to the app detail and be able to get your applications ID. If you can't get your app ID directly from that place, you can always come to the URL when you're editing your application. The last item on the URL is your app ID. And in between the app ID, you also have another, which is your environment ID. And then with these two information, you can also go to the tool. The tool is called Azure Explorer. Let me see if I can find it here. It's called Azure Explorer, but this requires license, of course. So if your organization has the license to utilize the Azure Explorer, you will be able to use it. Internally, Microsoft call Yes, I think look at it here. This is the Azure Data Explorer. So this Azure Data Explorer gives you the opportunity to go deep inside your application to be able to understand what is going on in your application if you cannot find it from within the monitor trace or from within the dev tools. Okay, unfortunately I don't have a subscription, so I won't be able to even open more details about this, but this is a very important application. It requires a level of license. So if your organization has this, of course it is a very, very big one for you to be able to do some deeper troubleshooting within your application. Okay, one other things that we also need to take into consideration is the fact that if your session has expired, or maybe your session is not within a period of time that the data is still stored in the Microsoft environment, you may not be able to get these details in the Data Explorer. Now, what am I saying? Microsoft usually have this storage time limitation. That, for example, if you are running Power Automate flows, you know that your flow runs takes 28 days, even though sometimes there are some grace of 2 to 3 days, which makes them 30 or 31. And then if you delete an email, I think you have about 30 up to 90 days. If you delete a SharePoint item, I think that's about 90 days, I think. I mean, I'm not an expert in all those areas, but I know that these grace periods are available. The same thing goes for the session IDs. So if you have a session and that sessions have actually has a very short lifespan in the storage space. So if your session is not maybe like within the first 21 days or maybe a few weeks, I mean, you want to use them to get information, you may not be able to get accurate data regarding what you're trying to troubleshoot. So you always have to get a more fresh session IDs so that you'll be able to get an appropriate data. Now, that is one. That is another. We also come into some of the things that we do encounter as issues within the application during development. One of them is what we call the delegation. Delegation is something that is very, very good because if you develop modern application, you will understand pagination. Pagination allows you to retrieve a particular number of items in the first page and be able to click next to be able to get to the next pages. Okay, pagination delegation in Microsoft actually allows the application to retrieve the first set of data and also processes all its query in the data source location. For example, if you are connecting to a SharePoint list and then you are querying the SharePoint list inside the Canvas application, and your Canvas application, of course, the default number of items you can retrieve is 500 and you can extend it up to 2000. So if you are querying and then you have stretched out your application to display this amount of data, 2000 records, and you have about 5000, 10,000, or even 20,000 records in your SharePoint list. And then you're sending a query to be able to filter something that is the ID is about 10,000 and above. If the queries that you are using or the functions that you are applying in your application supports delegation, it means that your query will work absolutely fine. Now, if the functions that you are using does not support delegation, that means it will only try to do the query at the app level. Now, when it does the query at the app level, you know that the only data that it has is this first 2000 records. And when it queries these 2000 records, the result that comes out will be based on these 2000 records, and it won't go beyond. Now, this is one of the things that we have to understand about delegation. So whenever you are experiencing an issue that, first of all, your record is not, the record that you have in your Canvas application here is not up to the amount of record that you have in your SharePoint list or your data source. Now, I'm using SharePoint list as an example because it comes handy, especially when you are building standard applications. You don't want to build premium application, of course, to maximize the use of the usability and then reduce the cost impact in the organization, of course. So one of the things you can do is go to the settings and then you scroll down. While on the general, you scroll down, you will see this data row limit. You will see that by default is 500. For every application you create, it is 500. $2,000 item per query. So if your application cannot handle delegation, what happens is that all the processes, all the queries within that data happens inside this application. But when your functions can handle delegation. The queries that you are running for these will go beyond this application and also run within in the context of the data source. That way, you'll be able to retrieve even more data. I was trying to discuss about what could happen when you use the appropriate function to filter records to avoid delegation, and when you don't, so that the data you receive will be appropriate, and you understand what happens when you use these functions, and also when you be able to determine what could be going wrong in your application when you are using a particular function. Now, for example, I'm using the ID to say if an ID is greater than 2, make a filter. Okay, please, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm using an ID to say if an ID is greater an ID is greater than to make a filter, and or if an ID is say less than 2. Okay, I'm gonna use not less than 2, filter this record. Okay, what is going to happen here most likely is that our record most likely will not be able to give us the accurate information. Because one, the ID data type does not support delegation for the most part, especially with the filter. And not just with the filter, with the greater than and the less than signs. With the equal to, the ID works perfectly fine, except when you are trying to work on some certain, maybe some certain combinations. Okay, I'm going to share something. Okay, equal to 2. I'm going to share something about this delegation. Just a moment. Let me search it out. Delegation, so you can understand the context of this. No. Delegation in Power Apps. Power Apps delegation, actually. Okay, so Power App delegation is going to give you a full understanding. Yes, understanding Power App delegation. I'm going to paste this link in the chat, so you can take some time to you can take some time to look at it. So here we have some functions or some models, some things that allow delegation. Okay, so we have for filter, search, first, and lookup. This can be delegable. Of course, you can delegate. They can work on large data set. But what about when you use things like the and maybe the in within a filter on either a SharePoint list or a Dataverse? Now, Dataverse as such allows some use of the combination of use of some functions or maybe arithmetic manipulations, while others do not allow this. Now, if what works in SharePoint doesn't work in Dataverse, all you have to do is find a balance and then be able to use the appropriate function to be able to query your data and retrieve what you want to retrieve. I'm looking for a table that is usually here. I'm sure that Microsoft made the change here. There's a table that is usually here that tells us, okay, this would work for SharePoint and this would work for Dataverse tables. Just give me some moments. I'm gonna look global context. Okay, it seems that this table is actually removed, or maybe it was moved to a different documentation. I'm going to take some time to look for it, and then when I see it, or if I see it, I'll just have to send it back so that everybody will have an idea about that. Now, also inside this filter, if you're trying to run an expression, for example, I hope I'm selecting the right. Yes, I'm selecting the right one. Save this. If you're trying to run a filter or maybe a search. Okay, now I see what's going on. So if you're trying to run a filter or a search, and then you are using the wrong function, for example, you understand, you may not be able to retrieve the actual amount of data that you want to retrieve. Say you're looking to retrieve about 10,000 records and display them in your data. Now, all this because of the function that you use within your filter context, or maybe your filter query, you may not be able to retrieve the amount of data. Say if you have 2,000 records and you have done a query to say, okay, retrieve this data when the email address, for example, they created by email, okay, created by email is equal to user, okay, user